The Blindside Podcast is not associated or affiliated with my current employers and is voluntarily recorded and produced on my own time. This is Blind Metal Gamer, and you're listening to the Blindside Podcast, streamed live at twitch.tv/blindmetalgamer. Hello everyone, Blind Metal Gamer here. It's now time for another episode of the Blindside Podcast. In this episode, Kentucky Blue Blood is back, and she is going to be telling more of her story of what it was like growing up in the 1960s. Kentucky Blue Blood, take it away.
Thank you, Blind Metal Gamer, for having me on the show. Hello, everyone. I really appreciate those of you that have listened to my story and are actually interested in my story. Tim always tells me that, and I always kind of smile because I'm like, why would anybody be interested in my story, Because my story is a hard story. But I'm glad for those that are interested. And my goal was sharing my story is that it might help other people realize some things that might have happened in their life. And that, basically it can help others and also facilitate systemic change within our systems, especially in Kentucky. So basically, my story is I was born close to 1960, and I was the second of 7 children. And my family had three of my sisters and brothers had a rare genetic disease. So they were disabled, and they called them handicapped back then. They called them mentally retarded. They called them a lot of different things, but that mental retardation, Tim and I talk about a lot because that is still a diagnosis. So we're going to probably talk about that later. But in the 60s, all 3 of them were born in the actual 60s. That was a really bad time to be born with a disability because as soon as they were born, the doctors told my parents to put them in institutions. And that's still happening today, too. They are still recommending institutions for people that have children born with severe disabilities. So I feel so sorry for my parents because I know they had to be heartbroken. And now that I'm older, I can kind of put myself in their place. And there was just no way out. I don't know how they survived it. But basically, they were diagnosed at Children's Hospital and written up in the pediatric journals. And it would have been equivalent to having 3 triplets in a family of 9 total, 3 triplets that never grew up, that stayed like babies. They never learned to walk. They never were able to, be potty trained or feed themselves. So if my mom didn't have the 4 other children to help her take care of them, there's no way one person or 2 people could physically take care of those children. So that was what they had to look at. There was no way out for them. So they weren't allowed to go to school. They were kicked out of the church nursery because they were different. They didn't look like everybody else. People were afraid of them. And I didn't realize the profound effect that had on me as a child until as an adult, we started looking back, trying to put their story together. And I bear witness to everything that happened there. But so think about having 3 people in diapers. There weren't disposable diapers. So for a short time, she had the diaper service where they'd come and pick them up and drop them off. But for the most part, she had to wash diapers. And eventually we were ran out of the city because people complained about them being different, the noise, because they cried a lot. So anyway, they were nonverbal, and the diagnosis they would carry today would probably be autism, mental retardation, and Marin's-Sjogren syndrome. because the rare genetic disease is called Marinenko-Sjogren's syndrome. There's only 200 cases like them in the world. And I am in touch with some of those cases, those people. And those cases, they grew into adulthood. Some of them have totally normal lives to where they got married, and they live in apartments on their own. So I found that interesting because Alice and Jeffrey, the first two, they stayed little. They did not grow into an adult size. But the youngest brother, Michael, he did grow into an adult size. So anyway, as a child, basically, my life was totally around caring for them. And then what happened, I guess, and some of this stuff's hard to say because it's like I feel responsible, but I ran away from home when I was about 15 because it became too much. And that's when they were removed. And my mom she always said, she gave them up to the state.
Oh, wow.
And I never understood that. Because I was like, why would anybody give their children to the state, But I get it now because she had no choice. She was out of options. When I was a little girl, I came home from school and she would just be sitting there rocking, crying and rocking in the rocking chair. Because she couldn't, it was beyond her control. And so it wouldn't have surprised me to have come home and found them all dead, that she would have just killed them and killed herself, because that's how hopeless her situation was.
That's horrible. Oh, man, that's not good. If I may I ask a question? You said that, she had to give them up. What? Before you continue.
Well, that happens today, Tim, too, when these children...
Yeah, does that still happen today?
There's articles today about that. What happens to parents, these kids grow up, they don't stay children forever. And
right.
Age, it's really hard when you're aging to try to handle a child with disabilities that's out of control in any way. So you can't get the services. They're forced to give their children up to the state. That's how come I get it, because the state doesn't do their job and help parents with disabilities. That's part of the problem right there. And then you got to compete for services and fight for services. Mm-hmm. But my mom didn't want anybody to think she did something wrong and then the state came and took her kids.
Right. I understand.
Well, I didn't understand at the time, but now I do because I know more about CPS. But I just wanted, it was important to her for people to know she had to give them to the state. They weren't taken because she did something wrong.
Right. She had no choice.
Right. So what happened when I left? That's when they were removed. And I didn't know if the state came into the house and took them or how that worked out. So eventually I got some of their records, and a lot of my answers I found in the records. But what happened, they had my mom and dad take them over to Children's Hospital, and they did a medical workup on them. And then they were transported from Children's Hospital down to Hazelwood in Louisville.
Oh, man.
So,
how part of Hazelwood?
The other thing was my dad left my mom when all that happened. So there she was. She lost all her kids basically at the same time. She lost her husband.
So she basically lost it all in one foul. So that's horrible.
And then she couldn't even work because her whole life, all she had done was taking care of kids. Mm-hmm. In the state, you couldn't get a food stamp back there. She couldn't get no food stamps when we had all those kids, much less when she was alone as a single woman with no credit in the 70s trying to you know,
So there was no type of like services like that.
there was nothing. There was nothing.
Wow.
I mean, there was a few things in their embassy, like
Mhm.
uh, I think it was called Riverside Good Counsel or Redwood,
Uh huh.
which was kind of respite. But when you have, okay, so think about it. My oldest sister graduated. She was a caregiver. Then I was getting
Mhm.
ready to graduate. Well, I ran away from home because I saw what happened to my sister. It was abusive. I mean, by today's standard, what was going on in that house would have been considered abuse.
Oh yes,
But it was
most definitely.
situational. It was because there was no, I mean, everybody was at their wits' end mentally. So, you know, even today, what is the solution? Really, she would have needed 2 or 3 caregivers to come into the home.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
that wasn't happening back in the 70s. I don't even think that would happen today.
I
But there
don't
was
think
no
it would.
simple solution, and the state isn't going to spend money. So here's the other thing. She couldn't get no disability, nothing like that. As
Hmm.
soon as the state took them, they applied for SSI and got it. All kinds of benefits kicked in and monies when the state took them.
Hmm.
That's what's wrong with the whole picture. When it's
Hmm.
the state taking them, they double dip. So,
Hmm.
and she said, if my dad would have been out of the home, if he would have left us, she said, we could have gotten everything. We could have lived rich. Because if we didn't have those children, my family would have been a middle class family. But because we had all the medical and all the problems,
Right,
we
right.
were in poverty. We grew up in poverty. That wasn't fair to my other sisters and me what the hell is the state thinking?
I don't know.
What are they thinking? They left little kids being caregivers for their whole childhood. They robbed us of our childhood. That's wrong. And then they come and try to take my daughter and grandson after what they did to my siblings. I'm mad at the state. I'll probably die mad at the state. Because you know what? If they did this to people like my family, they're doing this to everybody and anybody they can.
Oh yeah, who knows? I mean, they're probably doing it now, and we just don't know about it. They're just doing it, you know.
Oh, they
So
definitely are doing it now because it's CPS, Child Protection Services. And here's the thing, it's all secret. It's all secret. So nobody knows anything. And then it's so shameful. Nobody talks about it. That's why I'm just now talking about this stuff today because, you guys got to know the whole picture. But I think it's a eugenics plan. I think they tag families in their records that have genetic disorders or people with disabilities, and they come after every generation they can. And here's the other thing, I've warned my daughter and my other nieces and nephews about this. Our family is marked with that rare genetic disease because
mhm.
we either have it or we're carriers, and it passes from generation to generation.
Right.
So when they came in with my daughter and stuff, I said to the state, I'm like, wait a minute, my grandson could have this rare genetic disease. They acted like I was calling him retarded. They're like, he doesn't have retardation. I'm like, I'm not saying he does, but he can be a carrier. When they
Yeah.
separate the family, they separate the medical history. That doesn't go with
Mhm.
the family they knew nothing about. And then they
Oh
acted like
wow.
I was crazy talking about this rare genetic disease. I know more about rare genetics disease than most people that work for the state. Believe that. I've done the DNA and everything. I'm with Nord, and
Hmm.
rare disease people.
Hmm.
Their disease is important. They were important. They wouldn't have been able to find the mutation for that genetic disease without those three children. So they were used as research guinea pigs too their whole life.
That's not right.
And we were not paid. No medical bills were paid. There were ethics violations for my
You would
parents.
that Wow, they didn't even pay the medical bills. You would think they would have compensated for
No.
that. That
And
that.
the records children charted, and the records make me mad. But one time I would go with my mom to take them to children's. We didn't have
Mhm.
strollers or anything. There were no wheelchairs. We had to carry those kids on our hips up a hill to get to children's. Then the lady charged. My mom didn't have any money to buy a snack or lunch or anything. The lady charged, oh, she didn't pay. When she left, she didn't pay. Well, she probably didn't have the money to pay.
Yeah,
But
she
that
probably didn't
started
have it.
like, my poor mommy, I can't imagine what she had to put up with. And that's probably why I'm an outspoken bitch sometimes, because I'm saying it for my mommy.
Yep, you're doing what you got to do.
Well, she had to take their shit. And then when they were in institutions, she had to be nice to them to try to. She was sending money to in the institutions for them. She was
Hmm.
sending money so they could have extras.
Hmm. So I have a quick question for you. When you say extras, are you referring to like snacks, drinks? What type of extras are you? Or
Like
yeah.
clothing, what they might need,
Ah,
outside
gotcha,
of what
gotcha,
is provided.
gotcha.
I think, I think they did take them out some, but it's hard to really know. But
Hmm.
my mom had correspondence with the institutions. I give her credit for that because I was so mad. I don't fight well when I'm mad, but
Hmm.
she got mad. There's times in the records you can see she was mad because when she found Jeffrey was being restrained after Alice died in a restraint, she
Hmm.
was furious and she wrote a letter, and it was also documented. But what could she do? The state had custody. She couldn't get him out of there once he was in there. That's what people don't realize. If you change your mind or you get in a different situation, I started fighting for those kids when I turned 18. The state wouldn't even talk to me. There was no way they were letting me have my brothers and sisters. And I probably couldn't have handled three of them, but I could have taken one of them,
Oh yeah. I mean,
and they just wouldn't even entertain the idea.
it's you know why? May I, if you don't mind, may I kind of give a theory as to why I think that might have been?
Sure.
My theory, and again, listeners, this is just a theory. My theory is it was probably because they would lose profit, they would lose money.
Oh yeah, because see that's a good point. They do make money off of these people, and it's not
Hmm.
just people like my brothers and sisters, but it's anybody they take. And there's federal money that kicks in when procurement agency takes a child, and it has to reach a certain criteria for the federal money. But
Hmm.
the federal money actually capped as what is called CAPTA. That
Hmm.
was that legislation came out in the mid 70s, right when my siblings were taken. So what that does, that puts money on their heads. That does give them an incentive not to reunify the family, but to
Hmm.
adopt that child out.
Right, because they get money for it for each of the children.
And they actually did adopt Michael out, my youngest brother. See, it was
Right.
all about money, Tim, and that's a good point you're saying because again, nobody knows because all that's secret.
Hmm.
And now I think there's incentives like for state workers to adopt children, like they get $5,000 or something.
Hmm. No, I
But
don't have the logistics on that.
well, I
Um,
just know at one time there was an incentive because there's over 10,000 kids in foster care in Kentucky. We can't adopt our way out of this mess.
no, we
There's not
cannot.
enough forever homes for 10,000 kids. And nobody really wants the older kids. I mean, and sometimes they don't want the disabled kids either. I mean, honestly, they want a perfect kid. Uh, so I don't know. They probably do need to give incentives. I don't know that that's still going on, but that's kind of off the subject. But so anyway, what happened? My mom and dad got divorced. She
Hmm.
still kept two of my sisters at home, and Michael. So it was like it didn't all happen at once, but it was within the same time period, like
Hmm.
one thing after the other. But but I'm not going to be mad at my dad because I never realized the amount of stress it put on him, and he was a quiet man. So,
Hmm.
they never talked about this stuff. But what happened after, when I started talking to his side of the family, his brothers, they told me, it had affected him a lot. He just didn't show it, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? But it
Yeah,
affected.
it affected him, but he kept it inside. He kept it internal.
And then he had a massive heart attack at 53 right after he left my mom. So I'm
Oh
sure that put
wow.
him into an early grave.
Hmm.
So what happened, you know, my mom ended up going to nursing school because that's what she had done with those babies, basically was a nurse to them. So she, she became a geriatric nurse and worked at a nursing home, but she wanted out of that and couldn't get out because that's too much like what she was doing. You know what I'm saying? Because she had all
Mm-hmm.
Alzheimer's patients.
Right.
You know, she's worked there 25 years and she loved them, and she was a good nurse. She was good to her patients. But she never got over losing her children. She was never okay.
Right. That's something that you never get over that as a parent. I'm not a parent myself, but I can relate. I had a family member recently pass away, and my mother, it was my brother, uh, and my mother is still not over that to this day. She still thinks about it, and it still haunts her.
Oh no. I mean losing, but imagine losing three children.
Oh yeah, that would definitely
And to
have a
lose them to
profound
the
effect.
very state who's supposed to be held to a higher standard. And the state has never to this day been accountable for those children. A governor won't even acknowledge me. I tag Andy Brashear all the time. You know, every governor since none, when they were born in the 60s, uh,
Mm,
we've been talking to these governors trying to get some help. In the 60s, they wrote none. Not one governor acknowledged my family, not one, including Andy, or the work I do in advocacy. The reason I'm so driven in advocacy is because of what I've been through with the state of Kentucky. And my family, you know, my family has been sacrificed to the state of Kentucky, basically.
mm. If
So,
All right, real fast, if you don't mind, may I ask a quick question before we get back onto my question is, do you have anything you would like to say to the governor if he does listen to this? Is there something you would like to say to him at this time uh, that maybe he will listen to what you have to say?
yeah, Tim, I would. Thank you for that opportunity. Governor Bashir, I would just like to be acknowledged. I would like an apology from the state of Kentucky for what they've done to people with disabilities, for the ones that have been killed, restrained, harmed, and maimed. Um, just an acknowledgement. I mean, I know you guys aren't going to take any guilt, but just to acknowledge, you know, that happened. When I was serving on protection and advocacy, PAD board and PAMI council, there was an apology in the works from the legislators, and that has never come about. And I know you can't, you know, speak for the legislators, but you can speak for Kentucky, Andy. And I know you're a good man, and I know you care about people with disabilities. I see you acknowledge them and participate in the growth of people with disabilities. So, and also, I did apply for a board, and Andy, it's a council, and I'm not going to name the council, but I'm the one of the few people in the state that is alive that had people in institutions, which is a criteria to serve on that board that's hard to fill. And I applied for that board over a year ago, and I've waited years to apply for that board because Bevan was would not have appointed me because he's Republican. So I really thought I'd get appointed, you know, when a Democrat came in, and I have not been appointed. So I did like some kind of answer on that too, Andy, because you have to appoint that position. But other than that, yeah, I'd like acknowledgement for my work. I mean, people get that Kentucky Colonel thing. I don't have that. Nobody's acknowledged me other than protection and advocacy. I've gotten a couple awards from them, but and just for the work we've done alone on WWWKYHI, we have preserved all the history of Kentucky's asylums and institutions, including what happened to my siblings, on that website. And there's 5 researchers. All of that would have been lost if we hadn't preserved that history. So I deserve to be acknowledged for something. I should have been paid for something, actually. Because I've done all of this work the past 20 years totally voluntarily. I appointed myself.
Yep. Okay, so now continuing where you left off, what happened next?
Okay, so what happened next? When I turned 18, I had graduated early. I graduated when I was 16 and started Northern NKU. But when I turned 18, I was pretty much homeless before then. That's what people don't realize. These kids, teenagers, are homeless out there. The state misses them. But anyway, I was at college and I applied for a job at the railroad, and I got that job. That was when they started hiring women on the railroad. So I started working there, which made a big difference because that was a great paying job. And
Mm-hmm.
then what I did, I moved into Cincinnati and got away from Kentucky for a while. And most of my successful work history was always in Ohio. I was really, really successful in business. I left the railroad. I worked in office management for a couple really big companies in Cincinnati, always, getting the next job, moving up. Then I went into retail management. I managed a couple Paul Harris's in Cincinnati, one in Dayton. So once I had management experience, then I went into the replacement glass business, and I worked for Safelite Auto Glass, and that's a big national company. And
Oh, yes, I've heard of
I
them.
never had to apply for these jobs. They came and asked me, like from the time I went on into the glass business, my competitors would come and hire me away because I did really good. I was really good in that work. So then I eventually got the opportunity to buy my own company, and I moved down to Fort Myers, Florida, bought my first glass company. I was a single mom with a 3-year-old child. Um, so obviously in there I got married too, but that was a very brief part of it. I got married and had a child, and so then we were down in Fort Myers for about 5 years, and she wasn't happy down there because we didn't have any family. So she begged me to come back to Kentucky. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, okay, I'll put my company on, I put it on up for sale. I didn't think it would sell. It sold in 3 weeks.
Oh, wow,
Yeah. So
that's
I was
quick.
shocked, but I wasn't ready for that because I hadn't planned for it to sell. I just thought nobody's going to buy this company, but they did. And they
Mm-hmm.
bought it at my asking price too. So I sold the company, and I had to wait 6 months to make sure, they were successful because otherwise they had to take it back.
Right.
I came back to Kentucky, and that's when my mom said, "Oh no, you should have never came back to Kentucky." And you know what? She was right. Kentucky destroyed me. They came after me. And that's when Easterling came into it. And now, I'm sitting here realizing when you piss somebody off at a state level, they can
Mm-hmm.
screw up your housing. They can screw up your court cases. They can screw up your food stamps. They can totally sabotage you behind the scenes and you never know it. And that's exactly what happened to me.
All
I pissed
right.
people off and they
Uh,
came for me.
all right, Kentucky Blue Blood, if you don't mind, may I ask another question?
Sure.
Could you please explain who E. Sterling, or as you like to call him, Little Hitler, is for those who might be listening who may not know or may not be familiar?
Easterling is called Little Hitler by his colleagues. I guess he started out as an attorney in Kenton County. Then he became the prosecuting attorney, and now he's a family court judge. And so he was heavy handed in any case I had, which I didn't even know what that meant until one of my attorneys said, "Oh, he's heavy handed in this case." He was the puppet master in all the cases behind the scenes. So basically, he manipulated the cases, and if he couldn't, he would either somehow get the case, and if he couldn't get the case I had, he would come into the courtroom and intimidate me, like by walking in and sitting down in the front of the courtroom.
Oh, wow, what a jerk.
But he came for me. He's a bad guy, and I don't know if we'll ever get him investigated. But basically, here's the issue I have is ethics. So I had him on a couple other cases as a prosecutor. And then when I had that family court case with my daughter and grandson, that's where he was really heavy handed. For the other cases, I really didn't know he was involved unless he was the judge or prosecutor. But basically, after he prosecuted cases with me, he came in and was the judge on other cases. You can't do that. That's a conflict of interest.
Right.
And that's what he did. So then eventually I figured out, but see, here's the thing. If you have a mental illness, which at the time I got diagnosed with a mental illness, you lose all credibility. So anything I would say like that about the judge, they would just think I was crazy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
in other words, what you would say or your opinion did not count because of that diagnosis. Is that correct?
well, basically they think you're a liar.
Oh, wow. That's cold.
It's even worse than that. Once you have a mental illness, you have zero credibility within the court, within the medical field. I mean, it's horrible. And I no longer am considered mentally ill. My diagnosis is marked in full remission. But I took a beating. The worst thing I ever did was get disabled from that medicine and get labeled mentally ill. Because they start treating you like crap once they find out you have a mental illness, and then they beat you down worse.
That's horrible.
Beat you to death. They beat you to death. If you're poor and disabled in Kentucky, they beat you to death. They try to starve you out, basically. They did it to my mommy. They did it to me. They won't do it to my daughter and grandchildren, though, because you know what? They got up out of it. She's very successful. She got her education, got her degree, and got the hell out of Kentucky. Good for her.
Very good. Very good. Okay, if you don't mind, may I ask another question?
Okay.
At this time, before you continue with your story, is there any advice that you would like to give anyone who might be going through a similar situation that you're going through currently? Any advice you want to give them to help them with getting out of their situation, getting better services and supports for themselves or their families or those that they love?
Well, you know what I was told, and I don't know that this is the best advice because I don't know how much change I've affected. I've caused a lot of noise. I brought attention to the situation, but what I was told, because I was devastated when my daughter and grandchild left, it brought up all the past trauma of when my siblings were removed and then they died. 2 of them died in state care. I was very scared for my daughter and grandson because I knew the state, had a reputation of hurting people more than helping. So what I did, I was told, oh yeah, I'll get on all these boards and councils because that's how you can get something changed, like what they did to my family. Well, you know what? Nothing changed. I got on the mental health board. I got on the recovery network board. I got on Kentucky CAM board. I got on protection and advocacy board. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. What they do, they use the consumer for what they need them for. They got to say what they want them to say at the table, not protection and advocacy, but the other agencies. No, I don't think it's a good idea to get on their boards, actually. I think that's self-serving for them because nobody ever got my issue. It took me 10 years to get my issue to the table and figure out, okay, with protection and advocacy, the only way you can get your particular issue as part of the deal, which finally what I narrowed it down to was they take your child due to your mental illness is a violation of the ADA. They're taking your child due to your disability and not reunifying them. That's a state law. That's in legislature. So every year in legislation, protection and advocacy, you pick out priorities and you vote on them, like what you want to work on for the next year. Mm-hmm. So I got that as a priority. Finally, it took me 10 years, and finally we got that on as a priority. So that means we can work on it, right?
Right, you would think.
If it happens, I have a stroke and I'm in the hospital. They took that off as a priority and they said SAMHSA made them do it. But I was furious. I'm in the hospital having a stroke. I'm chair of that council, and you're doing that to me.
Behind
And
your back, no less.
that's the most important thing in my life, and y'all doing that to me. So I resigned. I resigned immediately. I was furious. And then to add insult to injury, here they come along with other advocates and set up a whole board and don't include me in it using my work product. And then they want to do it like, oh, let's be nice to DCBS and try to affect change. No, you know what? You're not going to get no change that way. You got to force them. And there was new law with the 2018 Family Act. There's a Family Act where they have to work to reunify the family before they remove the kids, which is what they should have been doing all along.
Mm-hmm.
So in that criteria is my whole push for reunification. But they're so that, I'm kind of probably talking in circles there, but I felt used by those advocates and those boards, not the one I'm on now. The one I'm on now actually works the way it's supposed to, but those
Right.
other people use people, and I no, that's wrong.
Yes, that is wrong.
Because I
Okay.
wore my car out driving to Frankfurt. We wear our cars out driving across the state for this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so after all of that and all that happened, what came next?
Well, basically, I got disabled from the medication. I had applied for disability because after all those court cases happened, my health was getting worse and worse. I had liver surgery. I wasn't able to function. So I had applied for disability for medical, and they gave it to me because of mental.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got the mental illness stuff going on, which I never felt like I was mentally ill, but I thought, okay, I need my disability, so whatever, I'll take whatever you give me. So then when I have to laugh, it's not really funny, but then, when I found out the medicine was all a big lie, that they had lied to us about the chemical imbalance, and
Mm-hmm.
I came off the medicine in 2012 and got better. Then they wanted to take my disability, and I was still sick from, it's called iatrogenic injury, because you're sick for like several years. If you've been on medicine that long, it stays that, even though it's out of your system, it's still in your body cells and stuff, and you're sick. So then I had to fight them to keep my disability. They always want to pull your disability out from under you. That's what it feels like. And they go, oh yeah, you can work and keep your disability. Yeah, you can, but it's really tricky.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I feel like it's a bait and switch all the time with the state and Social Security and all of them. It's
Mm-hmm.
like they're always trying to pull the rug out from under you. But anyway, so what happened? Basically, that's how I became an advocate, because when I figured out what the Kenton County Kangaroo Court was doing to people and
Mm-hmm.
the state, I thought, they're treating me kind of like they treated my brothers and sisters back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I got mad. And I thought, you know what? Hardly nobody fights for people with disabilities. I think I'll do that. So even though I didn't think I was mentally ill, I had to say I was mentally ill to be certified as a peer specialist. And I almost didn't get certified because I'm not mentally ill. I wasn't mentally ill. And you shouldn't have to say you're freaking mentally ill to be a peer specialist. That's bull crap. So that's something else Kentucky does I don't agree with. So I'm going to point out what I like and what I don't like.
Okay, go
Because
ahead.
what I learned as an advocate, I learned from the best. Protection and advocacy, I learned most of what I know from them. And it's all rights based: civil rights, human rights, disability rights.
Right.
So, I do come off strong. But at the end of the day, I've got a very soft heart, and I was hurt by the state with my children, and my siblings were like my children. I'm lucky I'm still even standing here after all y'all have done to me and my family. You don't mess with people's kids, Kentucky. You're a bad parent.
Okay, so What would be something that you would like to see change as soon as possible, based on what you described and based on your experience? What would be your top? If you could pick one priority to change to have them work on during the next legislative session, what would it be?
You already know what I'm going to say.
Say it.
Restraints and seclusion.
Yes.
Right, right. Because, very few people advocate for restraint and seclusion. Uh, and it's a hard thing to advocate for. But I do have a legislator that I got I think it was Virginia, wrote up, and they passed it, a new educational restraint law for Virginia. So
Hmm.
the legislator told me, if you get the wording, I'll go ahead and write the legislation. Now he has not presented it yet here's why, and I haven't been back with him, but I think it's because the Republicans wouldn't pass it. We got a red Republican House and Senate, so I don't see them passing anything to do with
Hmm.
restraints in educational
Right.
settings. But that's where it's got to start, because people with disabilities are being restrained in the school system. And there's several places you would be restrained. But here's the main important thing. There are times when restraints are necessary. When I had my stroke, I was paralyzed on the left side of my body. So
Hmm.
they found a blood clot in my brain, and they said, You can't move your legs." They were getting ready to go in through my groin to my brain to dissolve this blood clot. And they're like, "You can't move. It can kill you if you move." Well, my leg would just jerk involuntarily. So they had to restrain my legs. They didn't restrain my whole body, but they had to like put my
Hmm.
legs in restraint for my own safety.
So they
So
wouldn't move and
yeah,
move
and
on.
medically, there's a time if you're combative or yeah, they've got to
Right.
restrain you, but it's
Right.
supposed to be done in a safe manner for the person restraining and the person being restrained. But here's the issue we have as advocates: these are being used as a punishment for very minor infractions, like somebody might have threw a paper at a kid or something. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The punishment's not fitting the crime. It's using as a punishment too. And then people are being hurt and killed in the restraints, like my sister was. So restraints are always going to be my top one. Um, I know there's more than that, but restraints is, and I'd like to see something happen in my lifetime because I'm getting older now, and I don't know that we're going to see that happen. But I lost two siblings in a restraint. I lost Sissy in the institution. And
Hmm.
then when I got in her records, we found out they were restraining her 16 hours a day and for her own protection. But I think it was as a babysitter, because
Hmm.
that's when my mom got mad when she went after Sissy died. They were
Hmm.
restraining Jeffrey, and Jeffrey kind of told on him because they couldn't talk, but he pointed to her to restrain him after they were trying to leave the table. And
Hmm. Now, was the table in like a visiting area, in like a common room area? Because when you say leave the table, just in my mind, I'm trying to get
Oh,
that
they had
mental
a
picture.
canteen where when you went to the institution to visit, you could
Hmm.
take them into certain areas where it was like a day
Ah,
room or, but
so like a
but,
visiting area. Gotcha,
but
gotcha.
see, the thing is, they didn't restrain them in front of my mom. They were doing all this
Hmm.
when mommy wasn't there.
So it was behind. Oh, it was behind her back. Oh,
Oh
wow.
yeah. Oh, we had to let them know when we were coming. We couldn't just drop in. They had them all ready. They didn't let you see any of this bad stuff that was going on.
Hmm.
So anyway, basically what I wanted to say is I came out of that. I went through a lot and I came out of it. And I was really successful. I got married. I had a successful career, had a
Hmm.
child, you know, and two companies.
Hmm.
Then the drugs disabled me. And then I should have been able to go back to work.
Hmm.
But the state just keeps beating you down. Then they come for your kid and your grandkids. No. So here I am now, trying to tell this story. But no, so then they assume once you're on disability, you've always been on disability. It comes back to how they treat people with disabilities. I should have been able to have gotten back up, but then you lay on taking my kid and my grandkid. No, I was depressed for 10 years from that. I'm lucky I didn't kill myself over that. People kill themselves when you take their kid. Get that? You get that? When a parent has no hope left, that's the last thing they have of value in their life, and you take their goddamn kid? What the hell? What do you think's going to happen? You're lucky somebody didn't get that over that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. So, okay, that happened. And then what happened after that? What happened after all of that happened?
Well, her dad and I divorced, even though we were still friends. He ended up getting Alzheimer's. He had Alzheimer's during all that. That's why he couldn't work or anything, but we didn't know what was wrong until later. So that was really sad because he did get to see her one time before he died, but she didn't see us. She wouldn't see us, and the state didn't give us any visitation. But they sure wanted our money, buddy. They took his money and my money too. The state's greedy. So he ended up dying. He got all drugged up too and ended up in psych. They drugged him up. They drugged people with Alzheimer's. And he kept going over to Ohio. And so it got to the point where I had to let him go because I couldn't, when you're trying to cross state lines with disability and insurance and stuff, that gets tricky. So I had to leave him with his sister over there. And then she ended up putting him in a nursing home. And I got his death certificate, and he died from a failure to thrive. They starved him to death.
Oh, hell no. That ain't right.
I'm telling you, I'm sick over this, what they've done to people. They have no value of people whatsoever. Once they aren't, full members of society, they do whatever the hell they want to you, especially if you're poor. It's ugly. I ain't going to give you no happily ever after.
Yeah, none of that. So
none of that.
All right, after all that went down, what was it like, after all that, what happened next? And we touched about this briefly in the last episode that we did, but can you give a brief history of Wolfensberger's theory and how that might play into your story?
Well, I think you could give a better synopsis on that, but basically the way we connected Wolfenberger into it was with Easterling being called Little Hitler, but basically it was also when Voc Rehab, I tried to use Voc Rehab as my last resource to go back to work in the past year. And they started treating me like I was mentally retarded. And I said that to you, and you go, oh, that's Wolfenberger's theory. They're probably using Wolfenberger's theory. So then, I got some friends with the state, and I got some friends that are social workers. None of them had heard of Wolfenberger's theory. So, but that made sense. So you talk about Wolfenberger's theory a little bit.
Basically, to give a quick synopsis, Wolfenberger's theory is called social revitalization, or SRV. Basically, what it is, to synopsize in plain language, creating valued roles for people in society who have disabilities. So roles such as employee, uncle, parent, husband, wife, etc. It can be used to give valued roles, or if you don't see that by you, I mean, if the person who is creating the role doesn't see the person of having value, then they can give them devalued roles. Like, I don't know, just use your imagination and think of some roles in society that could be devalued. But it's basically creating roles for people. And if the person doesn't like the role he or she's given, what do? You should be, so Kentucky Blue Blood, do you believe that theory is antiquated? Personally speaking, I believe it's very antiquated and it should be done.
Yeah, I think it's totally a devaluing system. Once you can no longer work, you're devalued, not just by, it's by everybody. That's something it's hard to really articulate, but right away when I no longer owned a company, then all of a sudden, I had all these fancy friends, senators and stuff. Oh no, they don't want to hear from you. Once you lose your place in the social thing, you're devalued at every level. Medically, by the state, by the courts, by services you're trying to access, housing. You're treated like a piece of crap. And that is wrong. Those people are paid to do that job. They can be nice.
And
They
that is not
devalue
right.
you. They treat you like a piece of crap, and you don't even want to get any. You don't even want to do it, and that's their intent. They don't want you to. They don't want to deal with you, so they're trying to get you to go away.
That's not good.
No, because it sets you up to fail. That's why people don't go back to work. They want to know why people don't want to go back to work, because you're trying to starve them out every bit along the way and beat them down all along. That's why it's total beat down. And it's wrong. And I'm probably the only person, because I thought about it. You know why? Here's why I got mad at pretty much all the advocates in the state. There might be one or two I'm not mad at. Because it's, those that my sister died in the 70s. People have been dying. That wasn't an isolated incident like we thought. Why don't we have restraint legislation, advocates? Why? You know why? Because it's fucking political. And they could lose their goddamn job. I get it. But you know what? That's why I don't work for any of you bitches, you agencies. Because I'm going to say what needs to be said to get the shit done. So that's that.
All right. So, okay, after all of that went down, you had that. Where would you be at in today, current day? After all of that, what's happening now, currently? With you,
I'm kind of winding down. I'm trying to enjoy, the end game here. I'm just trying to stay in the game at this point because I do have some health issues going on that are pretty serious. But I really wanted to be on that last council because one of my other things is institutionalization. We talk about the restraints, but
right.
I went in those institutions. You never forget the sounds of those noises and the noise. It's people that can't talk. They're making those noises, but the sounds are real loud. But those people want out. They want to come back just like my siblings did. They don't want to be in institutions. Would you want to be in an institution?
Oh, hell no.
So my point is, I'm talking for those people because, protection and advocacy is part of their work. They get people out of Oakwood and places like that, Eastern State, wherever. But I said to them, okay, how did you know my brother wanted to get out? Because he couldn't talk. Susan said, oh, we can tell. I thought, yeah, because they all want to get out. But, he couldn't talk, but he was a friendly guy. So he was real personable. Even though he couldn't talk, everybody loved him. And he was little, so he was probably easier to place. But, people don't want to live in institutions, people. Here's my rule of thumb. Don't advocate for something you wouldn't want for yourself.
Exactly.
Like forced treatment. That's another area. They are forcing people to get an injection of their medication every month. That's called forced treatment. That's not treatment. That's terrible. Those people haven't committed a crime. So, yeah, I'm against forced treatment. I'm against forcing people in mental institutions or forcing injections into their body they don't want. Would you want that done to you for your own good? It's not for your own good. It's for whatever you think is their own good. That's not.
I wouldn't want no one forcibly injected me with nothing.
That's what I'm saying. People don't know this stuff's going on. I know all the seedy stuff because, believe me, when you serve protection and advocacy, you go in these places with them. So you see it all firsthand. And it breaks my heart. It literally breaks my heart. And I feel like I haven't done enough for people with disabilities. Even though, really, I served my whole life with my siblings. I mean, they died 10 years apart. I served for them because I loved them. But I just say it's wrong. These people are vulnerable. They can't fight for themselves. Even if they can talk, how are they going to call somebody like to get out of there? And here's the other thing. The institutions want to keep them because that's money.
Oh, yeah. It's a profit for them.
Well, they don't want them to get out. So, they're not happy when they see protection and advocacy coming. They're like, oh, here they come. I have to laugh a little bit, but God bless protection and advocacy, because they weren't around. They hadn't even formed when my Alice died in her restraint in Louisville. They were just being formed then. But that's all we got. They're the watchdog agency. They go in, whether it's juvenile justice, nursing homes, institutions. That's all we got. So God bless the work they do and the people they have doing the work, because we need an army. We need 100 of them.
That army of advocates. Oh, yeah.
Well, and to me, protection and advocacy made me into an advocate. And that's what I try to do. I try to teach other people what I was taught, because everybody needs to be an advocate.
Oh, I agree. I mean, even in, I do things on a professional level, but when I'm not at my professional job, I do advocacy in my own way with things that I love. And as you know, I'm a gamer, but when I'm not working, I'll pick a game or whatever, and if I see that it's not accessible, I'll find the developers and say, hey, may I make a few suggestions to maybe help you make it better?
Right.
Because it's like with the legislators, it's the same with the developers. They don't know unless you tell them.
Well, I disagree a little bit. The legislators do know, because this stuff's systemic. It's been happening over and over and over. They just turn a blind eye to it. The gamers is a little different, but
right.
But what I do find, a lot of people don't understand like the terminology and the proper way to address people with disabilities. So I think we're always constantly educating people about stuff with disabilities, and I learn every day. I mean, because there's so many different disabilities, and there's so many different, autism has their own, a lot of them have their own advocacy organizations are big enough. Right. But what I think we need, and I've talked about this before, I still believe it, we have to have joint disability advocacy to move these mountains. We need all the people on the mental health side and all the people on the DD and ID.
Intellectual disability, ID.
We need every person with a disability in their family to all come together and work on these issues together. We can move mountains if we work together. But we're segregated in the disability community. That's our biggest problem, in my humble opinion. Because I've looked at this as a business person. I've run businesses. This is so complex, but I've studied it so long. That's why it's important for me to give the state input, whether the state wants it or not, because I've studied your system. You're shooting yourself in the foot, So, and I believe we need a consumer organization for people with disabilities, and there may be one, but I think we need those at each state. So then we can have meetings in libraries and teach people self-advocacy. We can do it as grassroots. And what I am seeing happen on Twitter, several moms in Northern Kentucky have children with disabilities. They're running for office. That will help change things for people with disabilities too. If we get more moms running for office and people that have family members with disabilities, because a mom with a child with disability is going to beat you to death to get what they need.
Oh yeah.
They're not going to take no for an answer. So that I'm encouraged by that, and you all know who you are. I'm bad on names, but one is, I think it's Kelly Jones is running in Campbell County, and Melissa was on my podcast. Melissa Whalen, I think is her name, is running for commissioner in Newport. They have a lot of passion about advocacy issues. But yeah, we do. And some legislators do need educated because they're new to the, legislators, but the old ones know, but they need to be reminded.
Right.
So, But making a difference, the way I was taught, and I hate having to go to legislators, but basically we have to go to legislators and advocate for change there. And it takes a long, long time, like 20 years, to get anything changed. Uh, and that's frustrating for me. And the other thing, the other thing that bothers me is these waivers, all these people waiting on these waivers, like thousands, 5 or 6 thousand, probably more than that now. There were waiting lists for the institutions back when my siblings, there were waiting lists. They were on a waiting list for the institution. They didn't get services. We have to prevent kids from becoming adults that go into institutions. It's more expensive to house someone in an institution for care than it is in the community.
Yes, it is. It is much cheaper to. It's much cheaper to have someone live in their community of their choice, than it is in an institution. It's more
Well, and
expensive.
that's what you have to tell legislators, because it comes down
Yes.
to the money. How can we save them money?
Right.
Uh, and then also something that kind of went with that, and I lost my train of thought.
May I briefly say something about, you were talking about each of the disability groups, they need to come together. I agree, because we each have our own different issues on the table. There might be someone with, let's say, blindness, and someone that has intellectual disability or cognitive disability, or who might be in the
Or
deaf
deaf.
community.
I had
Right.
someone message me on Twitter. She's now a good friend.
Hmm.
Her granddaughter is deaf. So I learned more about, even with you being blind, I learned a lot more about blind people with blind disabilities, even though I had a friend with a dog and stuff.
Hmm.
But we need to understand about other people's disabilities. We have more, and
Right.
you and I have become great friends. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But that's helpful when we share information, because people are uncomfortable. That's what I've learned my
Hmm.
whole life. And sometimes I'll be uncomfortable too. I'm not going to lie.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
think your comfort level, like when people would see my siblings, they were scared because they look different. And we do. We're uncomfortable when people look different or they act
Right.
different. But it's okay. They're not dangerous. Just like people with mental illness, they're not dangerous. Very few people are dangerous with disabilities, so,
Hmm.
but I get it, because, I've been uncomfortable going in the institutions. You see all kinds of stuff in there, and I'm very uncomfortable, but you know what? I don't let them know that.
Yeah, you keep it internal.
Well, I just try to act like I would if it was my siblings, it's like, be
Hmm.
nice, smile.
Right.
But it's hard sometimes. So I think that's something that would help you if you became more involved with the disability community. Because the bottom line is, any of us can enter the disability community at any given time.
Yes, that is very correct. That's correct.
We know people that have had car accidents that ended up paraplegic. We know people that have had strokes that are in
Hmm.
nursing homes now. I'm a stroke survivor. I'm a heart attack survivor. It don't get any easier. So you have to prepare. You're eventually probably going to become disabled at some point in your life. So you need to change things now, because you know what? People get, oh gosh, I'm on disability now. What do I get free? Like they think,
I think it's all gonna be given for free. Oh, that's
they
all
think
good.
they get ramps built for it's like, oh, that ain't how it works.
No, that costs money.
Well, it's just people don't understand, and then the difference between SSDI and SSI, if you paid in and you worked, like I worked, I had a successful career. I made good money up until I became disabled. So I get the higher income of the SSDI than most people. But then I
Right.
don't qualify for any extra I don't get Medicaid, I don't get food
Right.
stamps. I pay a lot more for my specialists and my prescriptions. So there's,
Mhm.
it's just believe this, the system is set up that you can just barely survive on it.
Right. Okay. So to kind of conclude with our talk today, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for any future advocates that might be learning about advocacy or any potential future legislators that might be in Congress or local legislation that you would like to give to kind of impart your wisdom on them to help them in their advocacy journeys?
Well, I would recommend kind of doing what I did. One thing I do, I listen in on seminars. There's a lot of free seminars that are offered through different places through the disability organizations. Mad in America does quite a bit. Learn. You got to learn. You got to listen, learn, read, and stay updated on stuff. And it's not a bad idea to get involved with some of the disability rights agencies and serve if you want to, if you feel it's a good fit. But have realistic expectations, because everybody sitting at that table is there for a reason. Mostly it's because something's happened to them bad. But there are people there that are getting their degree, maybe in psychology or something, and they're just there, for that. But for the most part, everybody at that table, even the people that work for these agencies, these disability agencies, they're motivated to be there. They have a family member with a disability, a child with a disability, or even their own disability. But
Right.
you have to totally get involved and learn how to deal with your legislators, and don't make them mad, because the thing is, even if you don't like them, you're one party or the other, you got to go to both parties to get the bill passed or to get your advocacy issue addressed. So don't make anybody mad, and don't burn your bridges.
Right, that's very good advice. May I impart some words of wisdom of my own before we wrap up real quick?
Certainly.
All right. All right. Thank you, Kentucky Blue Blood, for that advice. Now, here's my advice. I would say to any self advocates, any soon to be self advocates, future legislators, learn the history of disability. I know this might seem a bit kind of, you're probably wondering, oh, Blind Metal Gamer, what do you mean learn the history? Learn the history, because if you know your history, you won't be damned to repeat it. And you'll be able to make systemic change that'll make things better for people with disabilities. So, real quick to conclude, I'd like to say thank you, Kentucky Blue Blood. It's been an honor having you on the show, and I've been honored to hear your story and hear what you have to say. It has been great.
Thank you, Tim. And if anybody wants to find me or message me or follow me, I'm at Kentucky Blue Blood on Twitter, KYBLUEBLOOD. And I network. I have 40,000 people on there, and I share a lot of disability information and some other stuff, fun stuff. But I'm respected on there for the work I do in disability rights.
All
So
right.
please join me.
All right. And would you mind to please give out that website again for those who might be listening who may have missed it the first time?
Oh, okay. Our Kentucky Historic Asylums is www.kyhi.org. And if you have any disability history or asylum stuff you want to share, a story or any records, you can contact us on the website.
All right. That will, I will definitely keep that in mind. Also, I want to say thank you to all listeners who will be listening to this on demand here on Twitch and over on YouTube when it drops. And also, this will be on Spotify, Anchor, and all other podcasting platforms, with the exclusion of Apple and Stitcher. So when it is out on those platforms, it will be available for listening. So with that being said, I want to again say thank you to Kentucky Blue Blood, and thank you all for listening. In the next episode, which will probably be airing in September, I will have Denver Queen back on to tell her story about how guardianship affected her and how she got her rights back several years later. So, with that being said, until next time, I've been your host for Kentucky Blue Blood. I've been your host, Blind Metal Gamer, saying so long, everyone, and peace out. Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of the Blindside Podcast. You can find the Blindside Podcast on a plethora of platforms, including Spotify, YouTube, Pocket Cast, Castbox, TuneIn Radio, and much more. Be sure to follow on Spotify so you will not miss a single episode.